Okay, but we will. Item 1 is roll call attendance. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Here.
Councilmember Palmer? Here. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Here.
Councilmember Borton? Here. Councilmember Byrd?
Here.
Mayor DeVeard?
Here.
And Councilmember Cavanagh is absent.
Okay, item number 2 is a Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight will be led by Troop 130, and I'm going to let them give you instructions on when to rise and all of that, so.
Will the audience please rise? Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Young man, if I could offer you a City of Meridian pin for leading us in tonight's pledge.
Scouts, if you're in the troop, if you're in service.
Thank you. Okay, item number 3 is our community invocation. I see Dusty Taylor here with 10 Mile Christian Church. If you will all join us in the community invocation or take this as an opportunity for a moment of reflection. Thank you for joining us.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time set aside just to say thank you. And Father, also just to ask that you be with those that were affected in that horrible shooting in Las Vegas. And not only that, the shooting in Kansas, the fire, and the victims here in Nampa. And Father, the list goes on, the victims of the hurricanes and the earthquake down in Mexico. Father, we ask that you'll be with the first responders, and not only here, but wherever they may be. Father, we ask for your watch care over them. Father, keep them safe as they perform their most dangerous duties. And Father, just ask for very special blessing upon their families that knows when they go out the door that can be a very upsetting time. Ask that you'll bless this meeting today with your presence here, Lord, and your wisdom and your grace. And we thank you, Father, for all of the men and women that work so hard to make Meridian a great place to live and work. And Father, throughout this day and throughout the days to come, we pray that we may continue to trust in you completely and be a blessing to those that we come to contact with. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that blessing. Item 4 is adoption of the agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd?
under the consent agenda, B, resolution number is 17-2038. C is 17-2039. Item P, they put the wrong number in for the change order. It is 55,000 instead of 50,000. And with that, I move we approve the amended agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. Item,
We do have one sign up for item 5, Madam Mayor.
okay. Item 5 is under our public forum. We do have one person that is signed up.
Yes, Mr. Merlin Slider signed up. The description of the topic is the sewer use fee in City Code 9-4-24.
Okay. Mr. Neri, this is one of the items on our agenda.
Madam Mayor, it's slightly different than the appeal item. I think he wants to talk specifically about the ordinance itself, not the results of the Board of Adjustment hearing. So I think it's to raise an issue of concern regarding how the ordinance is currently drafted.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Slider?
It's a little broader view than the appeal itself.
Sir, if I can please ask you to state your name and address for the record?
Merlin Slider, 1502 West Balboa in Cuna,
Thank you.
and rental property here in Meridian.
Thank you so much.
With regard to that rental property, the city of Meridian does not measure the volume of sewer use by residents directly, but bases their fees for sewer use on the gallons of water used. In the attempt to be fair and not to charge sewer use for water used outside of the home, the city calculates a water use winter average for each household and applies that volume as a maximum sewer volume during the other months. Again, in the attempt to be fair and to protect itself, the city wants to be able to assume higher sewer use in certain situations when higher sewer use seems apparent. City code prescribes the use of the city average winter residential water use, which is an average the city has established, or the city default CCA of 6,500 gallons as the maximum volume of sewer use when there is a change of occupancy during the winter months. Of course, when that happens, when there is a change of occupancy in the winter average cannot be calculated since the time period is interrupted. In a couple of other situations, sewer use may well be higher in the summer months than the winter average, and the city may want to be able to assume such higher use. If a change, for instance, if a change of occupancy occurs during outside of the winter months, during the summer, for instance, the city code doesn't prescribe the use of the city default CCA in that situation. It may seem obvious that new or returning residents would use more sewer, but the city code does not address this. The other situation is a vacant house with no water use in the winter, which remains vacant but has with no inside water use in the summer, but then the lawn is being watered, so it seems like there might be use. The city still wants to be able to assume there's inside water use and sewer use, but in this situation, that is incorrect. However, a plain reading of the city code does protect the interest of the owner of the house, since the prescribed calculation of the winter average, which it was vacant when it was calculated, was 0, and that's still the actual sewer use. So what's the answer for these two situations? A plain reading of the city code prescribes using 0 as the winter average for sewer use for the months following a vacant winter house. Best interests of the city suggests applying the city default CCA. The city also wants to be respected and to have its laws and rules respected and honored and to be seen as administering its business fairly. In part, those purposes are accomplished by being transparent, by allowing its actions to be viewed and reviewed, and by having its policies published, accessible, and understandable. For the city to take liberty beyond the scope of its own city code and routinely raise a utility fee above what is prescribed in the code is not being transparent. This is allowing a non-codified judgment to be applied by employees whose guidelines may change from time to time and are not available for review. So, specify city fees and possible increases to fees in the city code instead of allowing a fairness doctrine or unwritten guidelines to authorize such fees or increases. The city retains the right to reduce a fee in special circumstance, especially when fairness calls for it. And of course, since its actions are public, it would only do so when public review would support such a reduction. When the city wants to raise a fee unilaterally and without the authority of the city code, it really needs to be certain of the fairness of that action and have evidence to back itself up. If the evidence and facts proves the city wrong, the city could face worse embarrassment or liability. I also suggest that the average winter residential water use in the city be updated. Instead of 6,500 gallons, the current average is in fact 4,600 gallons as presented by the Department of Public Works of the City of Meridian in public hearing recently. Thank you for your attention and impartial review.
Thank you, sir. Council, this has been brought to your attention, the desire to have a conversation on a future agenda regarding our process of sewer and water fees and usage. Would that be your interest to put this on a future agenda?
One additional comment?
Yes, sir.
The language is essentially the same since 1985. A public records request by myself showed documents back in 2004, 1987, 1985. Hasn't been changed much since then. It's just been kind of passed on. It's kind of vague.
We appreciate you bringing this up. We're not going to have a conversation about this because it's not a posted item, but I guess the question in front of this council is, do they want to see it as a future discussion item on a future agenda? If that is the decision that's made, we will certainly let you know the date of that conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it looks like you've put a lot of time and research into it, so we thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
if that was a suggestion, it makes great sense. I'd certainly want to have legal and our Public Works Department have a chance to digest the proposed language, discuss how it does or doesn't correct the issues that have been raised, and see where that takes us.
Mr. Neri, shall we put this on for the first meeting in November?
Madam Member, members of council, I know there's a process that's ongoing in Public Works currently that involves this particular section of our code, not this specific one, but the general section of the code. And I don't know if there is a timetable that we could have all of that as one discussion. I don't know if we've picked a specific time. We talked about it a little bit this afternoon, and I don't know that we're settled on that, but we can certainly make sure Mr. Slider has noticed when we are going to discuss it, so that way he can be privy to the conversation and what the council's direction would be from that. But I don't know if it's at the next workshop or the one after that. But I would anticipate talking to Mr. Bolthouse, we'd be coming back to the council soon with some recommendations and moving forward on that question.
Well, I guess what I'd like to do is put this on our workshop for November
Okay.
for an update, and then you can let us know where it is in the process. But I'd rather have it on a date certain.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, item number 6 is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Month, and I know we have a special guest here. And so if Pam Orr and her special guest will join me at the podium.
Over here, Sparky.
Well, Sparky, thank you for joining us. What a great surprise to have you with us tonight. This is Fire Prevention Month, and so this proclamation will be in honor of that. And then I'm going to turn this over to Pam Orr, our prevention specialist, to say a few words, to talk about some of the upcoming events, because there are plenty of ways to get involved in and knowing more about how you can prevent fires in your homes and places of work. So thank you again, Pam and Sparky, for joining us. Whereas the City of Meridian is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both nationally and locally, and our homes are where we are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas the Meridian's first responders are dedicated to reduce the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention education measures such as Fire Safety Center and Project SAFE. And whereas our residents are responsive to public education measures such as Public Safety Day and smoke alarm checks, where they learn to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire. And whereas the 2017 Fire Prevention Month theme is Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out, which effectively serves to remind us all of the simple actions we can take to stay safer from fire. Therefore, I, Mayor Tammy DeVeerd, hereby proclaim the month of October 2017 to be Fire Prevention Month in the city of Meridian. And I call upon all the people of our community to heed the important safety message of replacing their smoke alarms every 10 years. And I'm going to turn this over to Pam Orr. And Pam, thank you so much for what you do in our community. I think you have a cadre of volunteers that go out and serve our citizens and spread the word of prevention and in helping them in their homes where they can. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that, definitely. So this month is a very, very busy month for us. Sparky and I and a group of our volunteers will be going into the schools. All of the students in all of the schools in Ada West, that's in Meridian City, will be receiving the message that every second counts, plan 2 ways out. Homes today are more vulnerable because of the items that we put in those homes. Fires spread so quickly in these homes that having 2 ways out of every single room is such an important message, and then planning to practice those 2 ways out with your families. So when your children come home and they've received that message, please, please, just go over it with them again and actually plan for them. Smoke alarms are definitely very important. They are the #1 defense in your home that you can have to save your life should you have a fire in your home late at night when you're sleeping. And so we are doing many, many, many programs. Domino's in town, if you're going to purchase pizza next week, Domino's are selecting random homes to deliver pizzas to, and we will be inspecting smoke alarms. If those smoke alarms work, you get your pizza for free. If they don't work, we're going back into the homes and we are bringing their alarm systems back functional for them. So it's a win-win all the way. And then lastly, this coming Saturday is Public Safety Day. We have joined efforts with the Meridian Police Department, and we have an open house at Fire Station #1 from 10 to 2, and where all of these things that we talked about are going to be educated to families and scouts. We have a special thing for you if you come in uniform. We have a lot of activities that the scouts in Meridian can be signed off on different badges. So thank you very much, and Mayor, thank you again. I appreciate you so much.
Okay, that was fun. Item 7 is the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
as stated earlier, item 7B, the resolution number 17-2038. Item 7C, resolution number 17-2039. And item 7P has been amended from 50,000 to 55,000. With that, I move we approve the consent agenda as stated, and for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as changed. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Milo.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer.
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move to item 9A under community presentations. Tonight we have our first of the year update from our Mayor's Youth Advisory Council Vice President Colin, and come on up. Thank you, Colin, for being here.
Yeah, of course. Hello, Mayor and City Council members. I'm here to present to you today the activities of what we've been doing in MIAC over these past couple months. So first off, again, my name is Colin Fries, and I'm the vice chair at MIAC, so I'm just here to discuss of what we've been doing. So first, I just want to address like our lovely picture of just our exec council members as we just got into the, started out the year. We first started out the year actually with what was called game night at Home Court YMCA. And what happened is we had a bunch of MIAC members come in and just play games, and we try to break the ice with everyone so that we can get everyone new, like freshman, sophomore, everyone new to MIAC just involved, knowing that they're important in MIAC and that they matter and that it's welcome to every single student at every school. And then we had the town hall meeting, which we actually put on. Jody, who helped set up the whole thing, and then us MIACers showed up and helped time the whole event for speakers who were speaking. We also grabbed questions so that the questions could be addressed to the candidates who were running. So that whole event was run by MIAC itself. And then we had the Treasure Valley Youth Safety Summit. This was actually a big event for us. There's, I think, 160 people who showed up from different schools around West Ada, also from like Eagle and so on. And it was crazy just to go there. And there's so many students that were impacted by the kindness and just growing together, led by Meridian Police Department. So what happened was we were sent into groups of each school, and we were sent out and had different jobs and activities to do. Like one had to address bullying, and that was a huge one that people were impacted by. And the whole focus of it was, you know, to have fun and feel like a kid again, but at the same time address real life situations that we face today. And so we had an amazing speaker who spoke upon kindness and how we can bring that back to our schools. And students were involved in just wanting to know more and more how they can help out in each school. And at the end, we had what was called a toolkit. And so what we're doing in MIAC is that each school is performing, let's say, if I put on a suicide prevention run, then we get points. And each school is trying to help out in the community, help out in the schools. And we're just trying to do it for each individual school and just help out in the community, if it's from a banner all the way to just serving in the community. And that was the big takeaway from it. And I thought it was just so amazing to see how many hearts were just impacted by coming to this huge event. And so these are pictures of just students just being impacted by what was going on. And then so the future events that we have coming up next week, Wednesday, is Farmstead Corn Maze. TAC is putting that on. And so we're going to have students. We want to get more and more MIACers involved in coming together and just socializing, knowing that MIAC isn't just all seriousness, but we're all high school students. We're all here to, at the same time, be serious and take situations seriously, but also to have fun and remember that we're in high school and that we can impact and change the community. And the last thing, obviously, is trunk or treat, and you guys all know what that is. So, but yeah, so these are activities we've been doing, and I just can't wait to come back and tell you guys about what we're going to be doing next month.
Thank you, Colin. Any questions from council? I do. How many students have shown up at the first couple of meetings?
Oh, I think we had, I'd say 100. Which one are you talking about? When we had the parents come as well, or the first
you can
official?
average it out.
Okay. Well, the first official one, we had 2 separate meetings, and I'd say, I think we had 160 kids register. Is that right, Jody? Yeah. And so it was a huge add-on to what was from last year, and it's actually been staying very constant. And so that's great just to see the kids coming back and more freshmen coming in, too.
Yeah, that has been exciting. So we have a number of high school students in the audience. What does it take to be a MIAC member?
An attitude just to serve the people around you and serve the community and wanting that ambition and passion to help out. That's pretty much it. Other than that, just show up to the meetings and be involved.
Thank you. Okay, council, anything further?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Colin, you touched on something that interested me, this toolkit that you've provided to your colleagues. And you indicated that there's a point system.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit more for me? How do you earn points, and is there a competition to do good in our community amongst the schools? And if so, when does that conclude?
Okay, so the toolkit was presented to us, and what it is there's bronze, silver, and gold. And bronze is 50 points, silver is 100, and gold is 150. The toolkit comes with, so 50 points, I believe, is like if 1 week you put on a PSA throughout your school, and you would get that for your team that we set up at the Treasure Valley Youth Safety Summit. So since I'm from Meridian, I'm in the Meridian group, so that's my team. And the more points you get, whoever has the most points at the end of the year gets a prize or a trophy. And it's pretty much just to celebrate like the passion of helping out in the community that you're doing.
So a lot of that is the focus has been on driver safety, on substances, and on bully behavior. And one of the things that was added this year, because our executive council thought it was really important that you not just listen and then learn through play, but you're able to then huddle with your peers afterwards and come up with some action plans of what is specific of concern in those schools and what they want to bring back as ideas to put into action in those schools. So they'll be reaching out to the student councils and other organized groups in those schools to encourage that collaboration in making an impact, a more focused impact in their schools. So we're excited to see how that will play out. Each of the executive council members has ownership in the accountability piece in their schools. So do the school resource officers that participated in the discussion and were there as they put together their action plans. So we're excited to see what happens in our schools, and we look forward to hearing a report back at the end of the school year to see how that worked out.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Thank you, Colin,
Yeah.
for being here.
Madam Mayor, just a comment too. I was able to attend the first MIAC meeting, and I was really impressed, not just with the students, but the level of engagement from the advisors. I wasn't aware that we had 2 people from the Meridian Police Department serving as advisors, as well as Macy Snelson from the Library District as an advisor, and then Renee and, of course, Jody and the mayor. And I just think it's really great to see this level of engagement with our youth. And honestly, I thought the candidate forum was a great event, well attended, well promoted, and you guys managed it well with the amount of candidates that were there. So it was really a great event. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, item 9B is under our Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and I see we have Steve, our chair. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I bring you greetings from the Solid Waste Advisory Commission. I am Steve Corey, and I'm chairman of the Solid Waste Advisory Commission. I represent SWAC at this time. We are before you asking for approval to use some of the Community Recycling Program Fund for a project. SWAC's concept was to have a joint bench project with the Meridian Arts Commission and Meridian Parks Department, and we very much appreciate their participation in this activity. This is the first CRPF project south of the interstate, and SWAC felt it was time for South Meridian residential recyclers to receive a project. As background, currently the recycling fund stands at just over $40,500, and we are in a phase where we are asking for community applications to use those funds, which we will consider, and I will be back in front of you if there's any we can recommend to you. But at this time, we're requesting authorization to use no more than $2,756 for one of the Catalpa leaf-shaped benches for the South Regional Park. And with that, I would stand for questions on this request.
Thank you, Steve. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
I move that we approve the spending authority not to exceed $2,756 for the Catalpa leaf-shaped bench for the 77-acre South Meridian Regional Park.
Have a motion, a second, any discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh. Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Thank you, Steve, for your service.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I would like to bring some news from the Solid Waste Advisory Committee of the county.
You bet.
Okay, first, some good news. Having pushed the county a little bit, they did sharpen their pencil and looked at their finances going forward to make sure that they can cover capping and expansion and various other things, and they can see that the fees that they're receiving at this point will cover their projected capital projects, so they do not expect to be requesting an increase in fees at the landfill.
Good news.
The second one is quite intense for us. We have been made aware that there is significant pressure on recycled materials markets at this point. That is to say, the cardboard, plastic, and so on. And there will be a great deal of effort this month to come to grips with how significant it is. The nature of it is just that China has significantly increased their quality requirement for the materials that they will receive for use within China. And the quality requirements are nearly unattainable. I guess if you have significant amounts of personnel that are willing to sort through things, you might get there, but it's very difficult for automation to accomplish it. And as such, we are being told that there may need to be some drastic changes to the recycled materials program. I will keep you informed in a very timely manner as this develops, but I just felt that it was necessary for me to give you some warning that we may be here within a month with some significant issues. And I would stand for questions about those two items.
Thank you. Council, any questions? I guess only that we look forward to hearing a follow-up discussion on the recycle program and the commingling. I'm sure sounds like it might be at risk. Okay.
Once again, thank you. We really very much appreciate your support, and we're always available if there's things we can research for you or you want us to consider.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Okay, under action items, action item 10A is a request for appeal to the Board of Adjustment Decision 2017-04 that was brought by Mr. Merlin Slider. This is a limited appeal, which means that the council's role is to review the complete record related to Mr. Slider's case before the Board of Adjustment, including the transcript from the BOA meeting and the board's decision to determine the following. One, whether or not the city's processing of Mr. Slider's disputed 2017 sewer use charges was fair. And two, whether the board's decision was supported by the findings of facts based on substantial evidence and conclusions of law that were not clearly erroneous. The City Council may affirm, modify, or overturn the board, a decision by the board. The Council's decision is final. No new evidence may be presented tonight, but each party will have 5 minutes to make a brief statement if they so choose. So I guess, Mr. Slater, do you wish to make an opening statement about this? And if so, please join us at the podium. And if you'll please again state your name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you. Merlin Slider, 1502 West Balboa Street in Cuna, rental house here in Meridian.
Thank you. And I will just state that you do have 5 minutes to tell us about your appeal and include what your specific objections might be.
The board did accept the argument and make an adjustment. However, it was still presumed to be a courtesy, and it wasn't a courtesy. It was stipulated by the city code. And I am not satisfied that the city is presuming that it can raise a rate when it doesn't have the authority in its code to do so. Typically, that allows adjustments to be made differently in different circumstances and maybe not fairly across different people because it isn't specified more clearly how to do that. One statement was made in the as justification for setting my sewer use average at the city default CCA that, well, there had been history of higher use before, so we really need to protect ourselves against someone using 10,000 gallons. But that very statement goes against your own protocols because you don't use a previous occupant's history to determine what the current occupants use. But in fact, that's what was being referred to. So that just shows that without better guidelines, improper judgments can be made. Part two of the appeal is that it's not, your average is not 6,500 gallons anymore. And the code specifies in lowercase letters that the city winter residential water use is X. It's not a published item, standard. It is what the city residential winter water use is. And as presented by Kyle Reddick at the meeting, by Public Works calculations over the last 3 years, the average is 4,600 gallons, not 6,500 gallons. So the city's using the wrong standard across the board as a default CCA. Don't have the legal authority to do that, I don't think. Item three, the house was vacant over the winter. Winter average calculates mathematically, 0. Follow the code, follow the language of the code, calculate it at 0. There was no change of occupancy. Winter, the residential water use over the summer inside continued to be 0. My statement to that effect should be sufficient. The burden of proof lays with the city to prove otherwise because the city code does not specify that you have the right to assume something different. I would say that it's reasonable to assume something different. There's water use at the house now when I'm watering the lawn. You really need to have it in the code to allow you to assume something different. It's not stated that way. It's stated that it would be the winter average. The winter average was 0. Should stay as prescribed by the code. So this is really just a focal point now for actually my contention that you need to update your code. But my request is that, in fact, my winter average should be applied as my CCA, not the winter average calculated by the city 30 years ago. And if you, in fact, decide to leave it at the city default CCA, it shouldn't be at 6,500. It should be at 4,600 in specifics. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Slider.
Stay here for questions, or?
No, I think that now we'll hear from the BOA and see what they say, and then I'll open it up for council questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Ms. Pogue? You two will have 5 minutes if you'll please state your name and position.
Thank you. Andrea Pogue, Deputy City Attorney, Mayor, City Council, Mr. Slater. We're here tonight because Mr. Slater asked the board to adjust his winter average to 0 and his account to be credited $16.62 for sewer charges because, in his opinion, they are not based on the winter averages prescribed by Meridian City Code 9-4-24. The Board of Adjustment held a hearing that lasted approximately 1.5 hours. Upon its conclusion, the board decided to credit his account as requested, to reset his winter average to the 6,500 gallon default per Section 9-4-24, and 3, the board waived future sewer usage charges while the property is vacant, provided Mr. Slater presents supporting evidence of non-occupancy to MUBs. Mr. Slater just expressed the basis for his appeal. So before us, you're asked tonight to review the board's decision. Did he receive a fair process, and was the decision based on findings of fact supported by substantial evidence and lawful conclusions of law that aren't clearly erroneous? Regarding the process provided Mr. Slater, the city complied with the notice, scheduling, and process requirements for resolving a dispute before the BOA as required by Meridian Code Sections 9-4-21, Code Section 2-8-6, and 2-8-7. Regarding the decision, let's review the board's findings of facts, or at least the majority of them. Mr. Slater's property was rented in 2016 and had a winter average of 10,000 gallons. It has been vacant since September 29th of 2016, and there was no water usage through March 15 of 2017. In the absence of metered winter water consumption, pursuant to Section 9-4-24, the computer is programmed to set the winter average to a default of 6,500 gallons per month as the cap for summer sewer charges. Mr. Slater queried the utility staff about this average, and based on the absence of winter consumption, it was administratively reset to 1,000 gallons, which is the minimum a winter average can be set because 0 is not a recognized number for winter average by code, resolution, or historical billing practices. Mr. Slater testified that, but for a handful of times that the toilet may have been flushed while cleaning up the property, all delivered water this summer was applied outside of the home. City water is used to irrigate the property. The board found that the small amount of delivered water supported his testimony. Learning this, staff testified that there is precedence in the case of vacant homes without pressurized irrigation to allow for a sewer adjustment. Staff testified that had Mr. Slater requested a sewer adjustment on the basis of home vacancy versus his interpretation of code, it would have been granted administratively, provided that he had been able to present some proof of non-occupancy, such as an Idaho power bill or a gas bill. Mr. Slater testified instead that his interpretation of the code dictates that a winter average of 0 is required based on the lack of water usage during the applicable winter 4-month period, and that home vacancy is not specifically listed to receive the default 6,500 gallons. He further reasons that a 0 winter average would yield 0 sewer use charges during the summer, and he therefore deserves his write-off of his sewer charges. To this, staff responded that since the winter average is the max or cap that a person will be charged for summer sewer usage, his interpretation leads to an unacceptable result. That would be free sewer usage. His interpretation would also conflict with Code Section 9-4-1, that users of the sewer system are required to pay for their use, and that it would impose an unfair burden on ratepayers as a whole. Regarding this section of code, staff testified that it allows for flexibility in that the fairest billing practice is to establish a realistic winter average based on the customer's historic usage. However, when no usage is available and the section lists some examples for when that might occur, this code section establishes a winter average of 6,500 gallons, which is the average winter residential water use, unless the current water meter reading is less than 6,500 gallons. In that case, the sewer use charge is based on actual metered water use.
Ms. Pogue, your time is up.
Okay. May I just conclude?
Please.
Okay. The board's decision to adjust off the 1662 was based on the precedents for non-occupied properties. The decision for the winter average to revert to the default 6,500 gallons was based on section 9-4-24 and the board's concern that when occupied, a winter average of 1,000 gallons would not pick up a change in occupancy in the property in question. The board's decision to allow Mr. Slater to provide proof to MUBS of continuing non-occupancy was also based on precedents and did not impute on him a burden that has not otherwise occurred in similar situations. Therefore, based on this review and your own review of the findings of fact and conclusions of law, this council may affirm the board's decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So, council, this is your opportunity to ask any questions required of Mr. Slater or Ms. Pogue regarding, again, making sure that we focus on whether or not the city's processing of Mr. Slater's disputed 2017 sewer use charges were fair, or two, whether the board's decision was supported by findings of facts based on substantial evidence and conclusions of law that were not clearly erroneous. So with that, I would ask if there are any questions.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
I do. I've got a couple for Ms. Pogue, if I could. Make you come up here to. One might just be to clarify. I had heard remarks made in his presentation about the CCA, the average usage being 4,600 a month, not 65.
And Councilman Borton, Mayor, Council, currently the code sets 6,500 as the default.
Right.
The basis of his hearing, the request for his hearing, wasn't for the board to decide what the the residential average is in the city. That's not really within the purview of the Board of Adjustment to decide. That would be a question for the council. So that testimony came up during the conversation, during that hearing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't directed to the decision that the board faced regarding Mr. Slater's sewer use charges.
Right. Madam Mayor, the reason I ask when I look at the materials that are in the packet for us, and you referenced 9-4-24, and it speaks to the winter average of 6,500, but if there's a metered rate less than that, then the lower rate is what's utilized, the actual?
Correct. 6,500 is the cap.
Right.
In other words, if somebody's filling up their pool, it's not going down the sewer. That's recognized. So whatever that individual's winter average is set at, it would be the cap for what it could be charged. Okay. Now, in the case of the decision by the board, the fact that they reset it to 6,500 gallons because of the lack of consumption during the winter months doesn't impact Mr. Slater because of their following finding and decision, which was to waive future sewer use charges if he can show proof that the property is vacant. And that was based on precedents. So whether it was 6,500 or 4,600, the fact is, as long as that property remains vacant and Mr. Slater communicates with MUBS, and MUBS would prefer that to be an annual adjustment discussion versus a monthly discussion, then he would have his charges credited.
Madam Mayor,
Mr.
follow up to that. Help me reconcile the reference in, and I think the record speaks to a resolution of a base no less than 1 or 1,000.
Correct.
As being the base, and then the ability to actually go to 0 if it's a vacancy.
Okay, Councilman Borton, I'm going to try and answer that, but if I don't make sense, I'm going to defer to Kyle to testify to that.
And,
Oh,
and I'll give you the little scope of the question is not necessarily it's more the legal, what's set forth in the code. Do you have the discretion or not to go below the 1,000? We,
Okay.
the city, have
Right,
the discretion to
so
go below.
the resolution for, the last resolution to set out sewer use charges sets it at 1 or 1,000, not at 0. So what that means is that because the city wants people to pay for their sewer use, 0 to 999 gallons of delivered water for purposes of calculating the winter average for summer sewer charges, it doesn't show up. That meter has to turn over to 1,000 in order for there to be a registered amount to be charged for water and perhaps for sewer, depending on what the CCA is. Does that make sense? Our system is based on the 1,000 gallon, not on hundreds of gallons. So we start at 1,000 gallons. Everybody gets 0 to 999 for free, essentially, because the meter's going to roll when it hits 1,000, and then it'll just, catch itself up.
So everybody's charged at least the 1,000 base.
That's correct. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Borden, I'm not sure that what you just said is correct. Everybody gets charged a base fee, and in the case of water, the base fee is $5.49 a month, and in the case of sewer, it's $8.65 a month. What Andrea was just explaining is that since we meter at 1,000-gallon intervals, if the user uses 999 gallons the first month of their account, they will get charged 0 for water and 0 for sewer. They use 999 the next month, their meter will now be at 1,098 or 1,998, and so now they'll be charged for 1,000 gallons, and likewise for the next month. So they don't have a minimum usage fee; they only have a base fee every month, and it's possible if they don't use enough water or sewer, they will be charged 0 for usage. Does that answer your question?
It does, somewhat. And what got me confused was and I apologize for making a mess of it, when the record spoke of the resolution 14-1018, billing rates and fees.
Correct.
The city's minimum charge is 1 or 1,000, not 0. And I was trying to reconcile that, what sounded like a base fee or base usage with the ability for the city to say it's 0 if you can prove that it's vacant. They sounded like they were in conflict, but maybe I've got them sideways.
Okay, I'm thinking when we talk about that the board was willing to waive his sewer use charges based on non-occupancy, that's really different than resetting his winter average at 0. They did not do that.
All right. So, Madam Mayor, sorry to belabor this. So
Okay.
the $1,000 base is the base, and it's not eliminated. You're just saying the decision was to waive it under these unique circumstances, if there's a proof of vacancy.
Correct.
All right?
In his situation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And had that, Madam Mayor, and had that been the basis of the appeal in the first place, or the request for adjustment to start this whole thing, that would have been granted.
Can you clarify that statement?
That's what I recall hearing, that had the request initially come forward with an
Correct.
argument that it's vacant, and the request for an adjustment is based upon vacancy, that would have been granted by the city, but
Correct.
he,
Provided he could show proof
sure,
of vacancy in the sense of a power bill that's de minimis, or in this case, the board found the small amount of water that was delivered supported his testimony that he was applying the water outside. It wasn't going down the sewer this summer. It just seems as though the issue to Mr. Slater isn't the monetary credit. It's the point that his interpretation of the code is that there can be or should be a winter average of 0, and that somehow the city's interpretation not to do that is extending courtesies to him or other people if adjustments occur, that we've been erroneous in applying it the way it's been applied historically in the city. And that is historical use, 6,500 gallon default, or actual use. That's the intent of MCC 9424, is to give some flexibility. And then to how winter use is, winter averages are established, because there are so many situations that could yield non-consumption, not just during the 4 months, but throughout the year. Mr. Slater's correct to observe that, and he's correct that it's not all included in the code. And that's because the code merely establishes the methodology for set, in the absence of an actual sewer meter, we have to try and establish some fair way of gauging sewer use. And so we do that by looking at a winter period where it's charged 1 for 1. For every gallon of water, gallon for sewer charge per gallon. And then over those 4 months, we take the average of water consumption to arrive at the winter average for application for summer sewer use charges. It's confusing, and ask questions to understand this, because it is difficult for lay people as well as for staff. Could the code be written more clearly? That's the subject that will be coming up at the November workshop, and I don't think anyone on the city side disagrees with Mr. Slater that it could be written better. But the fact is, in that code section, while there are examples where non-consumption may occur during the critical 4-month period, those are just some illustrative examples. There is not language in that code that limits those situations as being the only ones that get a default of 6,500 gallons set. So it provides guidance, and like most code, what happens next is the city applies the code through policy and practice and procedures, and that is what has been done. And in speaking with the utility billing manager, how she applies that code section when it's the period of time, which is, I believe it's April, for setting winter averages. Snowbirds come back, and there's discussion. If there's 4 months of non-consumption, it's set at 6,500. If someone calls in and says, oh, wait, I was a snowbird in Arizona, and can give her some show of what their usage was, within her administrative discretion, she can reset that winter average. That's what Mr. Slater did on his April bill. He saw the 6,500 gallon default, called in and queried it, said a little bit about the property being vacant, but I don't think he gave the full story that this was a non-occupied property for an extensive period of time, because he just went into his interpretation of the code, and his interpretation is much more narrow. And so he did receive an adjustment to his winter average as low as could go, which is 1,000 gallons.
Okay. Any further questions for Ms. Pogue?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylan?
I'm not sure if this is for Andrea or not, but I think that this is getting really, it's a pretty mucky case, because we're talking about code, we're talking in lawyer speak and code speak, and I'd like to speak in people talk in layman's terms, because most of us aren't lawyers and we don't write code. But I think that by discussing the code, which is what we have on a future agenda, is just making this, I think, more confusing. I understand what the code is, but what we need to understand today is what the appeal is. So the house was vacant. You told him you'd credit back the money from when he wasn't there, and that you'd zero out the future sewer if he shows that the house is vacant. So I'm having a hard time, since you gave him all that, understanding what the appeal is, other than changing the code, which is something we're going to talk about in November.
Correct, Mayor, Council. Yes, I would say he appeals that the request for him to give MUBs some supporting document that his property is vacant is burdensome and unfair to him, that they are asking him to do something they don't otherwise do. And the board received testimony from staff that is what they've requested in similar situations in the past. So that's one of his
Seems
appeals.
fair.
Okay. The second appeal isn't specifically that the board reverted his winter average to 6,500 gallons, but a twist on that it should be 4,600 gallons. But that's the subject matter that wasn't before the board at all. So it can't be a part of this appeal because it's a limited appeal. This isn't a new hearing.
And it's a moot point.
It's a moot point, exactly.
Madam Mayor.
Kavner?
Thank you. Andrea, through your presentation, you indicated that MUBS has the ability to verify that there's low water usage. Is that accurate? I recall you saying that the person who's here providing testimony for us today had said, hey, I haven't used any water on this property, the house has been vacant, and that we were able to look and say, yeah, that's right, there hasn't been a lot of water usage.
Councilman Kavner, Mayor, Council, I believe that what occurred at the hearing was that he stated his water was going on the lawn. The board recognized that they had to decide whether they believed him or not. Because of the small amount of water that had been delivered, I mean, his bills have been extremely low this summer, they drew a finding of fact, or that the metered water delivery supported his testimony. In other words, it didn't seem like that was enough water to be used inside and outside. It was for, his lawn. So they just found that. Now, I think Carrie Glenn or Kyle Raddock could say they can tell if there's low water use or high water use, but that's not the city's job to monitor people's use. So that wasn't what the discussion was about during the hearing. They may have that capability, but they don't do that in this case. They were just looking at the billing records.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Any questions for Mr. Slater?
That's why the house is empty.
Madam Mayor, it looks like Mr. Slider had a comment that he wanted to make, and I wanted to give him the opportunity to be able to do that.
Councilman Morton, you referenced.
If you'll wait until you
I'm
get
sorry.
to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Before you speak. Thank you. Go ahead.
Councilman Morton, you made reference to apparently to a section of city code that specified a unit of 1 as a minimum. Where is that?
Madam Mayor, excuse me, it's referenced in the record, in the findings. It speaks to a resolution, 14-1018, billing rates and fees. The city's minimum charge is 1 or 1,000, not 0. Give some context around the discussion about why it's not.
Is that part of the ordinance where 9424 was established? I'm not familiar with.
I'd have to defer to legal counsel on the source of that citation. It's just in the record, so I'd prompt the question.
Say that again. The code section was ordinance?
Madam Mayor, it's referenced as Resolution 14-10-18.
14-10-18. Thank you, sir.
Did you need further, any clarification? No.
Just in comment, I would take issue with some of the characterizations that the city deputy mayor made, and trying to express my position on, in her words, isn't quite the right way to do it. But protocol for the meeting required it.
Council, any questions? Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
Mr. Slider.
Slide-
We do have a question. It's my
Right. Madam Mayor, I'm going to pose the same question that I asked of her to you, so that maybe to clarify what the appeal is for, other than changing the code. You don't want, so is it correct that you just don't want to show a power bill to prove that the residence is vacant?
I think I would want the city to abide by the language of its own code, which is that the calculation in the code as prescribed in section 9424 specifies a mathematical formula, and 0 is just as valid a number as 1. And I don't know that, I don't recognize, I didn't see, I don't have reference to the setting of 1 as a minimum versus 0. I don't, it's not in city code, not in section 9424. So actually, it should be set at 0 unless your code is changed to allow you to presume something different. Yes, they made the adjustment. That is effectively what needs to be done. So it's more a focal point
Okay.
for hoping that you will address the wider concern.
Madam Mayor.
It's my
And sir, we are going to address the larger concern, and I appreciate that you brought that to us.
It doesn't, this part of it isn't that big a deal.
Okay, because in my mind, I'm thinking if they actually adjust it to 1,000 as opposed to what they did, you would be paying more.
It would have been easier on me if they'd adjusted it to 1. I wouldn't have gone through all this process, right?
But then we wouldn't be reviewing the code.
Right.
So thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
Mr. Slider, sorry. And I'm probably just going to restate her question in a way that maybe makes sense in my brain, so that I make sure I've got it understood as well. So what you're looking for is to have the winter average of 0 applied to the summer months, whether or not the home was occupied, because that's your interpretation of our code.
No. The city saw use, water use, going through the meter. They asked the question. They don't have the authority to make a change. They have all the right to say, hey, this doesn't seem right. I say it's vacant. That's all that the discussion should be. I don't think that's right from your perspective either, because that puts you in a bad situation. But that's the way your code reads. So yes, it should be set to 0 in my situation. That's what my appeal focuses on. My CCA should be set at 0, because that is what is prescribed by your code. Reasonably, you should be able to assume use if there's use, even though the house had 0 usage over the winter. Reasonably. Your code doesn't allow that. I talked with 2 attorneys before coming here, and one said, yeah, courts look pretty closely at the actual language. They read it pretty carefully. The second said, Well, most judges will allow a city to interpret its code however they want, as long as it's reasonable, which obviates this entire appeal. If the city wants to just leave it the way it is, they can. Judge isn't going to overturn it. It's reasonable. You're trying to do reasonable things, but you're not being clear and transparent to the people that read the code. It doesn't make sense when you do what you do when they look at the code.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Neri.
Yes, I didn't want to comment on the board decision since I was part of that, but I didn't know if Councilmember Wharton wanted an answer to that resolution and what that reference of 1 was in relation to. Because I have the resolution in front of me. So the resolution was approved by the City Council on September 16th of 2014, and this was in regards to billing rates for both sewer and water, both the base rate, as Kyle stated earlier, as well as the consumption rate. And it does presume a consumption of a minimum of 1 unit of water as what the rate would be, and it's identified in here. I think what Ms. Pogue was talking about is the unique circumstance where there is no consumption of water in relation to sewer usage. But this resolution does contemplate a minimum of 1. There is no 0 in this calculation. It's a minimum of 1. And as was previously stated, the 1 through 999 gallons of water consumption is charged at the base rate only for that level of consumption. Once it passes 1,000 gallons, then a consumption charge is charged per 1,000 gallons at a time. So I just wanted to answer that particular part of your question, if that's what you needed.
Mr. Slater, thank you again for joining us. Council, any other questions for the appellant or the city?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
No, I don't have a question, but a comment. I appreciate the thoroughness of the process that's gone on before today's hearing. It's not necessarily, even though we might want to have it like a do-over, a new trial, so to speak, a new opportunity for a hearing, because we don't see this very often. And you brought up some very interesting points that obviously have piqued the interest of the mayor and council. But the scope of today's hearing is somewhat more narrow, and it's not necessarily an opportunity to litigate and rehash the record and the facts, but in review of the record that we all have, I myself don't see anything that is evidence of a process that is unfair or has been unfairly applied. It appears that the conclusions of the Board of Adjustment is supported by the record and evidence that's before us. And it doesn't appear that it's clearly erroneous. Not a clearly erroneous application of city code. I think what's happened and what we're left with, I'm not inclined to vote to alter the decision of the Board of Adjustment, but I think you've done a great service to the city in pointing out opportunities, if nothing else, to provide additional clarity within our code. So even though it's fairly applied, and the application is supported by evidence, our residents and users are able to easily understand it and maneuver around it and comprehend what the city's trying to do within its language. And our legal department is probably already well aware of opportunities to clarify that, but that's obviously for another day as well. But I think that's of great value. So in light of the narrow scope that the mayor outlined for today's hearing, I'm inclined to affirm the decision of the Board of Adjustment on today's appeal, and then have our legal staff work on opportunities that this case has provided us to make things more clear in the future.
Is that a motion?
Just comment at this point, unless there's any other comment.
Any other comment? I would entertain a motion then.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
based upon the record before us and in light of today's hearing, I would move that we affirm the decision of the Board of Adjustment with regards to Merlin Slider's appeal.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Mr. Slater, thank you for your time tonight and for bringing, highlighting a place that we can really add some greater clarity and we find those things every now and then. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. And thank you to staff. We appreciate your time as well. Okay, item 10B is final plat for H 2017-0128.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. First application before you tonight is a request for a final plat. This site consists of 5.45 acres of land zoned R8, located at 570 South Linder Road. The proposed plat depicts 29 building lots and 2 common other lots on 5.45 acres of land in an R8 zoning district. Staff has reviewed the proposed final plat for consistency with the preliminary plat and the dimensional standards of the R8 district and found it to be in compliance and in substantial conformance as required. No written testimony has been submitted on this application, and staff is recommending approval per the conditions in Exhibit B. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Does the applicant have any comment? Thank you. Council, this is a final plat. If there's no further information needed, do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
I move we approve the H 2017-0129 with applicant and
0128?
staff comments.
128?
0128, yes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 10B. There's no discussion. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh. Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer.
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 10C is a public hearing for H 2017-0107. I will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It doesn't appear my map is coming through on the vicinity map for some reason. The next applications before you are a request for a development agreement modification, a preliminary plat, and a conditional use permit. This site consists of 14.27 acres of land. It's owned CG and located approximately a third of a mile north of East Ustick Road and west of North Eagle Road. This is just to the is in the Kohl's Shopping Center and just to the north of that development area that's part of that commercial strip. This property was annexed in 2003 with a development agreement that has been subsequently amended a couple of times. Comprehensive Plan future land use map designation for this site is mixed use regional. The applicant requests a modification to the existing development agreement to change the development plan for the northern portion of the Center Point development from a self-service storage facility, which is shown on the bottom site plan here, commercial and multifamily residential uses, which is shown on the east side of Center Point Drive there. They're proposing to change it to mostly multifamily residential with some vertically integrated residential. The preliminary plat is proposed, consisting of 61 building lots and 4 common lots on 14.27 acres of land in the CG zoning district. This is a re-subdivision of lots 9 through 11, Block 1, and lots 16 and 19 through 26, Block 2, Center Point subdivision number 2. The plat is proposed to develop in 4 phases, with the first 2 developing at the same time. Access is proposed to the residential uses via Center Point Way, and that is the street running through the center of the property here. It is designated as a collector street. 2 driveways are proposed on the west side of Center Point, and 3 driveways are proposed on the east side. A driveway access for the parking lot at the community center and swimming pool is also proposed on the west side, and that is right here. Because the UDC limits access points to collector streets, council approval of the proposed accesses is required. There are also 2 accesses to the east-west driveway to Eagle Road at the south boundary of the site. And this is you can see where my pointer is here, the private drive that runs out to Eagle Road. A conditional use permit is requested for a multifamily residential development consisting of 215 dwelling units on 13.06 acres of land in the CG zoning district. The units are proposed to be configured as 4-plex townhomes, with each unit having an upstairs and a downstairs. Private usable open space, common area, and parking is provided in accord with UDC standards. A 6-foot tall vinyl privacy fence is proposed along the north and east boundaries of the site. 2 building types in various color schemes are proposed for the 4-plex structures within the development, consisting of 2-story units, 3-story units, and 3-story with 2-story units on each end. Buildings along the west boundary are proposed to be all 2-story 4-plexes to preserve view corridors of the adjacent development and provide a transition to the 3-story structures. The architectural character of the structures are required to comply with the design standards listed in the City of Meridian Architectural Standards Manual. And this map shows the red dots. Those units are all going to be 2 stories. The Commission did recommend approval of these applications. Jonathan Seal and James Doolin, applicants' representatives, testified in favor of the application. No one testified in opposition. Irene Schreier commented, and written testimony was received from James Doolin, the applicant's representative. Key issues of discussion were the concern regarding traffic impact on Ustick and Eagle Roads, desire for traffic calming for the driveway along the west boundary of the site, and the effect of proposed development on property values. Key issues of discussion by the Commission is the phasing of the amenities within the development, and the adequacy of parking for the commercial uses associated with the vertically integrated residential uses. Commission changes to the staff recommendation were as follows. At the request of the applicant, the 5-foot tall metal view fence depicted on the landscape plan along the east boundary of the site is proposed to be changed to a 6-foot tall vinyl privacy fence, and the splash pad, plastic contour benches, and a public art should be removed as proposed amenities, as they were not intended to be included as amenities in the final plans. And secondly, include a condition that requires speed bumps to be constructed within the driveway along the west property boundary for traffic calming. And lastly, modify condition number 1.2.4 in Exhibit B to allow the swimming pool, clubhouse, shelter, and playground to be constructed with phases 1 and 2 prior to issuance of any certificate of occupancy within the development. The only outstanding issue for council tonight is the applicant is requesting council approval of a waiver to UDC 11-3A-3 for the proposed accesses via the Collector Street. That's North Center Point Way. Written testimony since the commission hearing has been received from John Carpenter, the applicant's representative, in agreement with the commission recommendation. The applicant did wish to go into detail with you regarding the site amenities, the open space, and the off-street parking, so he will provide more details on that. Staff will stand for any questions.
Council, any questions at this time? Okay, would the applicant like to make comment? Good evening. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Jonathan Seal, 2906 Haven, Eagle. Sonia, if you can go to the overview slide for me, please.
I'm not sure. This one? Okay. You're welcome to control up there too, Jonathan, but if
Okay.
you'd like me to switch, I certainly can for you.
Yeah, I was, let's see. Bear with us here. There we go. First off, I think Sonia did a very nice job of giving you the details on this, but what I'd like to do is just highlight some things that I think are important on this project. With respect to the design highlights, as I mentioned, you've got the vertically integrated buildings along the south perimeter, in other words, just north of Hobby Lobby. When we met with staff a while ago, they were very optimistic, I think, or very pleased about the vertically integrated buildings. They like the concept of it. I think it's got a lot of appeal with the commercial and the retail. There's highly planted landscape buffers. Again, we've incorporated a lot of that. There's a very walkable connections in there between that and also Champion Park subdivision. There's a good land use transition between Center Point's commercial use to the south and Champion Park subdivision, which is a single family to the west. There's 4.25 acres of open space, whereas the city code only requires 1.73. Then the other thing is all exterior and landscaping are managed by a HOA association, and I think this is a very important point. There is a document that's very specific about control. At the time that these buildings are sold, there's a fund paid then, a maintenance fee, and there's a monthly maintenance fee. This literally covers, for lack of a better word, all the maintenance for the exterior of this project. The only thing it doesn't address is the interior of these fourplexes. That is the painting, that's the driveways, that's the building, that's the landscaping, that's the streets, the sidewalks, the common areas, the amenities. Well, I think that's important is, you probably have heard times where people will have rentals and there's an absentee landlord. This, you absolutely are sure that whether it's 6 months after it's done, 3 years, 4 years, as you're driving through it, you're not going to look and say, well, there's a guy, he must live out of state because he doesn't see the condition of his property. The condition, the condition or the standards for maintenance of this project will be equal or potentially superior to any of the other subdivisions within Meridian. I think that's an asset to the community. The next one is the amenities. So I don't know, Sonia, as far as the amenities go, in other words, as far as amenities, we have the clubhouse, we have the urban plaza, which is over in the southeast near the vertically integrated. Again, we have the pathways throughout without the development. We have the walking trails. We have a swimming pool, which is 20 by 40, a children's play structure area, an open soccer area, an open grass area, a dog park, and also two shelters. So again, I think there's a wide variety of amenities here that can encourage people to stay within this project, in other words, instead of traveling out of it. As far as parking goes, if you look at that, we've got 594 total parking spaces, which is 2.77 spaces per unit. The requirement is 2. There's 164 extra parking spaces beyond what's required within code. There's 48 bike parking spaces, 26 are only required. Within the vertically integrated, there's 1 parking space per unit and one space per 500 commercial. So there's 47 parking spaces, there's 48. I guess the theme that I'm trying to say and kind of going through the amenities and stuff is I think Mr. Doolin, the applicant, has not tried to meet city code or requirements. He's exceeded it. And I think that speaks to the quality of the development and the quality of the developer. So I think those are important aspects. So with closing, I think this is an excellent project. I think one of the things that I think is important here is that this actually offers the city a third option for housing. If you think about it right now, pretty well, within a few exceptions, you've got your single-family home that you can rent or you can buy. You've got your apartment project that you can live in, which may be a 2-, 3-story, 4-story thing. So those are your primary options. This offers essentially almost what I would call a single-family structure. If it wasn't attached, it would be. The maintenance is taking care of it, and you have the flexibility of still being able to rent it. So I think it brings a third option to the city, and I think it's an asset to it. So with that, I will stand for any questions that you might have.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
Jonathan, I heard the word townhouse. So to understand this clearly, will each individual unit be sold and individually owned or as a fourplex?
Mayor, Councilman Mylan, it will be as a fourplex. So I think of it mentally, and so maybe that's not as a townhouse, but it's 4 units, so it's a fourplex. Each one of those will be sold individually as a fourplex. So.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So they'll be sold as a fourplex instead of condominiumizing the spaces under.
Madam Mayor,
the
that
roof.
is correct, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Jonathan.
thank you very much.
This is a public hearing.
The only other sign up, Madam Mayor, was James Doolin, the applicant.
Okay. Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to provide testimony on this application?
Madam Mayor, I know this is a little unusual, but in my review of this, it kind of snuck up on me that I missed one thing on the review, and I want to ask the applicant if they will, can you go back to the map there? In the design standards, there's a requirement to make a second connection to the water system if it's reasonable. And in my analysis of this, I modeled it, and I just missed it. Right now, the only water connection to this whole entire thing is coming from on that center point water main. So my request to the applicant would be, would you, it looks like there's a couple opportunities to make a water main connection to the existing water main in that private drive on the south. Looks like you're talking about 80 feet or something like that. So is that something the applicant will consider to do? Okay. Thank you.
I know the public record doesn't capture shaking of the head or. You know better, Jonathan.
My name is James Doolin. My address is 4685 South Highland Drive, Salt Lake City, Utah. Madam Mayor and council members, our answer is yes, we will add a second, we'll have a secondary connection to the water line.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, I guess I will add one thing. We came with that project a few months ago, presented in front of you. You guys asked us, hey, we like your project, just find a better location. At that time, that project had some challenges. There was an existing development agreement that capped the amount of multifamily units. At that meeting, I wish I had this project in my back pocket, but we're here today, and we think it'd be a great addition to the city, and we ask that you guys approve it.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, is there any further testimony on this application?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
seeing none, I move we close the public hearing on H 2017-0107.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
I move we approve H 2017-0107 and to include all staff and applicant comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 10C. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
does the motion include the access points to the collector?
Yes.
I believe, okay.
And the inclusion of the water.
Water main and all that.
Okay. Are we missing something, Sonia?
Sorry, did Joe already address the access, the waiver for access to the collector street? Okay, I thought he did, and then I was, okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kavner.
just a comment. I think that, sorry, Dean. Over the past few weeks and months, I think the question about multifamily has come up a lot. I know it's come up a lot with constituents reaching out to me, and I just wanted to say to the applicant, we need more of this in Meridian. This is well-built, well-designed, right location multifamily. It's going to serve our communities, both large and small, and thanks for bringing the project to our community.
I guess what I'd add to it is the consideration of condominiumizing as well. Certainly from our aging population, I hear from residents that want to own, but they don't want to maintain a yard, and they would like to have the kind of amenities that this development is offering with that ownership opportunity. So, and we don't see those. So at some point, we hope that that's something that the market can bring. I know it's one of those scary unknowns, and it's a little bit more complicated, but we appreciate you coming back and finding a more an adequate site for this type of a project. Anything further from council? If not, Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 10D is a final plat for H 2017-0125.
Madam Mayor, Councilman, the next application is a request for a final plat for the first phase of Brickyard subdivision, the preliminary plat you just approved. This site consists of 5.44 acres of land, Zone CG, located at 3611 North Center Point Way. The proposed final plat depicts 30 building lots and 1 common lot on 5.44 acres of land in a CG zoning district. Development is required to comply with the dimensional standards of the CG zoning district. Staff has reviewed the proposed final plat for consistency with the preliminary plat and dimensional standards of the CG district and found it to be in compliance and in substantial conformance with the preliminary plat as required. Written testimony has been received from John Carpenter, the applicant's representative, in agreement with the staff report. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions in Exhibit B. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
I have none.
Okay. Applicant have anything to add? Please state your name and
Yes.
address for the record.
Jonathan Seal, 2906 Haven, Eagle. We're in agreement with the staff report and ask that you approve the final plat.
Thank you. Council, hearing no further questions, do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
I move we approve the final plat on H 2017-0125 and include staff and applicant comments.
Second.
A motion is second to approve item 10D. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 10E is final plat for H 2017-0126.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the next final plat is the second phase of development of Brickyard subdivision. This site consists of 1.88 acres of land, Zone CG, located at 3611 North Center Point Way. The proposed final plat, I guess I better get on the right one here. The proposed final plat depicts 8 building lots and 1 common lot on 1.88 acres of land in a CG zoning district. Staff has reviewed the proposed final plat for consistency with the preliminary plat and the dimensional standards of the CG district and found it to be in compliance and in substantial conformance with the preliminary plat as required. Written testimony has been received from John Carpenter, the applicant's representative, in agreement with the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions. Staff is recommending approval.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? Any comment from the applicant? You know, you don't have to comment.
I didn't want to shake my head again, get yelled at. Jonathan Seal, 2906 Haven. We're in agreement with the staff report and ask that you approve the final plat for Brickyard Sub Number 2.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
I move that we approve H 2017-0126 with all staff and applicant comments.
Second.
Have a motion is second to approve item 10E. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Mylum.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
Councilmember Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 11A is under Planning Division and Legal Department. I guess I will ask Mr. Neri for an update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We have a very simple 8-page agreement that only took 2 months to get back to you. We do have an agreement before you that's been signed by the property owner in relation to the property at 1035 East Fairview. All of you are familiar with that. We have worked out a lot of the details. The only addition I would add, what we've done is try to create both the hookup agreement now with the conditions the council required for future annexation. We did draft a proposed preliminary draft of development agreement because that's part of the annexation process. We're all aware that the direction was that the existing billboard that's on the property would remain under the conditions in our code. There's one change that's from what's in your packet. There's an Exhibit B that's listed in your packet, and the Exhibit B that you have says provisionally approved site plan, cross-access to be required prior to occupancy. That was an exhibit page on an early iteration of this agreement. We have replaced that now. The current one just says provisionally approved site plan. The site plan is still the same. The issue of cross-access is not before you today. We have discussed that for a future discussion at the annexation stage on whether or not that would work or be practical, and that would be part of that public hearing at that process, but it isn't part of today. We're ready to move forward. I don't know if planning has anything else. Mr. Clark is here representing his client if there's any questions about this agreement, but I think we've got it to where all parties are satisfied it meets the intent and desire of the council's direction from July 25th.
Any questions from council? Okay. Mr.
Mayor.
Palmer?
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the agreement on the property at 1035 East Fairview. If we're on that.
Next item.
Okay. Item 11B is the agreement for the item that Mr. Neri just discussed. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have all kinds of seconds. Any discussion? Seeing how everyone seconded it, probably not. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilor Mylum.
Aye.
Councilor Palmer.
Aye.
Councilor Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilor Borton.
Aye.
Councilor Byrd.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Council, any items under item 12 as future meeting topics?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Byrd.
I think we've already discussed the, coming back and looking at the ordinance on the water and sewer modeling and stuff that we need to get straightened, which I know Public Works and Legal can work on that. That's something we need to get taken care of sooner the better, but we want to make sure that we got to remember that when we set these fees and stuff, that we're not just looking at today. You've got to look at what's coming in the future, what these fees have got to cover. So, you know, it's something that is tough. For the 20 years I've been here, these water and sewer fees have always been something and that we've struggled with at times, and other times we haven't. Sometimes we've done it right, sometimes we've done it wrong, but I think we definitely need to look at that ordinance and make sure that we get it so that, as Councilwoman Mylum said, something that us laymen can read, that we don't have to have a jurist doctorate to understand what's on it.
Or an engineering degree. Between the two, it's kind of scary, right? Point taken. We'll make sure that an update, if not the full discussion, is on the workshop in November. And that's November 14th. And I'm sure that next week during the workshop, we have the annual update from Public Works. They might even touch on it there. So with that, I do have a couple of upcoming events. The final Kleiner Park Live is Thursday night from 5:30 to 8:30, featuring B-Town Hitman retreads. We'll have the Public Safety Day on Saturday, the 7th, as Pam Orr mentioned. That is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Fire Station Number 1. Coffee with the Mayor next Tuesday on the 10th from 8 to 9:30 at one of our newer restaurants, the Flame Broiler. And finally, for those interested in football, we got the local rivalry from Meridian versus Mountain View on Friday the 6th at Mountain View. It's kickoff at 7 p.m. So with that said, if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes.